My sister tried to turn my wedding into her engagement proposal, but I said no. My mother called me on a Tuesday while I had half a sandwich in one hand and the clinic schedule open on my desk, which was already a rude setup because nothing good ever begins with your mother saying, "Are you busy, or can you come by after work for a little family talk?" A little family talk, in my family, meant someone had already made a decision that involved my money, my time, my guilt, or all three, and they just needed me to sit there while they decorated it with phrases like, "We only want everyone to be happy." I was 27, managing the front office at a dental clinic, which meant my whole day was people pretending they weren't afraid of root canals and then getting angry about insurance. So no, I was not in the mood for emotional theater after work. But my wedding was coming up in the spring, and my mother had that soft voice she used when she wanted me to feel like saying no would make me the villain in a movie only she was watching. So I went. Of course I went. Yes, I know. That was my first mistake. Not my last, sadly. My mother smiled too brightly and said, "Honey, before you react, just listen." There it was, the national anthem of bad ideas. My father cleared his throat and said they had been talking about the wedding reception. My wedding reception, the one my fiancé and I had saved for. The one I had spent months planning between appointment reminders, billing problems, and crying in my car because centerpieces cost more than my first used sofa. He said my sister had a beautiful idea that would make the night even more meaningful for the whole family. My sister leaned forward like she was about to offer me a kidney. "I want my boyfriend to propose to me at your reception." For a second, I honestly thought I misheard her. I blinked at her, then at my parents, then at the phone in the middle of the table, where my grandmother made this tiny, pleased noise like someone had just announced a baby. My sister kept talking, because apparently silence from the bride means continue digging. She said the flowers would already be there. The photographer would already be there. Everyone important would already be dressed up and emotional. And it would be such a waste not to use that energy for something else too. Something else. My wedding had been downgraded to an energy source. I said, absolutely not. Not softly. Not politely. Not with the gentle little smile women are expected to wear when they're about to be robbed in front of witnesses. I said it fast, flat, and probably louder than necessary. My mother flinched. My father looked disappointed, which was his favorite expression when I remembered I had a spine. My sister's face went red. She said, "Wow, you didn't even think about it." I said, "There's nothing to think about. It's my wedding." She rolled her eyes and said, "It's a reception. It's a party. You'll already have your ceremony." I laughed. I actually laughed, because what else do you do when someone tells you your wedding reception is basically unused emotional real estate? So, because I already got married earlier that day, I should donate the rest of my own wedding to you? My grandmother cut in from the phone. "Don't be ugly. Your sister has waited a long time." And there it was. The oldest sentence in my family, just wearing a new outfit. My sister had waited. My sister had struggled. My sister had always been almost there, which somehow meant I had to keep stepping aside until she caught up. When we were kids, if I won something at school, my parents took us both out for ice cream so she wouldn't feel left out. If it was my birthday and she cried, my mother let her blow out one of the candles. If I got a new dress, my grandmother asked if my sister had seen it first because she's older, sweetheart. She notices these things. I had spent my entire childhood being trained to make myself smaller in ways no one admitted out loud. But this was not a dress. This was not a candle. This was my wedding. My father said, "No one is trying to take anything from you." I looked at my sister. "Did you already talk about this with other people?" She didn't answer fast enough. I said, "You did." My mother said they had only floated the idea because they wanted to make sure it was smooth. Smooth. Like hijacking your daughter's wedding just needed good logistics. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. My hands were shaking, and I hated that because my sister noticed and got that little satisfied look she always got when she could call me dramatic later. I said, "You all discussed my reception, my photographer, my guests, and my timeline without me. Then you invited me here like I was the last signature on a form." My sister snapped, "Oh my God, you're making this so ugly." "No," I said. "You made it ugly. I'm just refusing to pretend it's cute." I grabbed my purse. My mother started saying my name. Evelyn, in that warning tone like I was still a teenager slamming doors. My grandmother muttered that I was acting jealous. My sister said the whole family would agree with her because normal people like seeing others happy. I turned at the door and said, "Then let normal people plan their own engagement moment." I drove home with my chest so tight I had to pull into a grocery store parking lot and just sit there for a minute. I didn't cry yet. I was too angry to cry. Crying came later, because apparently my body likes to schedule humiliation in phases. By the time I got home, my fiancé had dinner warming on the stove, and that careful look on his face, the one people get when they can tell you either need a hug or a legal defense fund. I told him everything in one breath. I talked so fast I barely tasted the words. He stood there with the oven mitt still on one hand and said, "No, that's insane." I loved him for saying it that plainly. Then my phone buzzed. My sister had texted, "I hope you're proud of yourself. You just proved you can't handle anyone else being loved." I stared at it, and my fiancé reached for my phone like he wanted to throw it into the sink. I didn't let him. I took a screenshot instead. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me knew this wasn't going to be one mean text and a bad dinner. Maybe because managing a clinic had taught me that the person who documents first usually cries less later. Not always, but let me have my little coping strategy. After I screenshotted it, I sent one message back. "Just so there is no confusion, I do not approve any proposal or engagement moment at my wedding. Do not plan anything around my reception." The next morning, the family group chat was quiet in that fake way, like everyone had gone into separate rooms to gossip more efficiently. I went to work, answered calls, smiled at patients, and pretended I was not checking my phone every 3 minutes like a raccoon with anxiety. Around lunch, my aunt texted me privately and asked why I was threatening to cut off the family just because your sister wants one happy moment. I read it twice. Then a third time, because I thought maybe my brain had inserted the stupid part. I wrote back, "Who told you I threatened to cut off the family?" She replied that my sister was very upset and said I had screamed at everyone, accused my parents of using me, and said I might stop helping them financially if they supported her happiness, which was fascinating because at that point I had not even mentioned money. My sister had taken the ugliest possible version of a future argument and started distributing it like a flyer. I called my aunt from the empty supply room at work, surrounded by boxes of gloves and tiny paper cups, because apparently that was where my dignity lived now. I explained what actually happened. I said my sister wanted her boyfriend to propose to her at my wedding reception without my permission, using vendors I had paid deposits for. There was a pause. Then my aunt said, "Oh, she made it sound like she just wanted to give a small toast." A small toast. Sure. Just a tiny little toast where her boyfriend pulled out a ring, got down on one knee, and turned my wedding video into her engagement announcement. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried into a towel, because my fiancé was on a late shift and I didn't want to be standing when I fell apart. Very glamorous. Very bridal. The thing that hurt most wasn't even the proposal idea anymore. It was how easily everyone accepted the version where I was cruel. Like they had been waiting for a headline that matched the role I had always been assigned. My sister was emotional, complicated, misunderstood. I was capable, sharp, responsible, and therefore apparently made of concrete. My fiancé came home and found me with swollen eyes and my wedding planning binder open on the floor beside me. He didn't say, "Calm down," because he valued his life. He sat next to me and said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to uninvite everyone and get married in a courthouse wearing sweatpants." He said, "Okay." I looked at him. "You'd do that?" He shrugged. "I want to marry you. The napkins are not sacred." That made me laugh, which turned into crying again because emotions are a scam. I told him I didn't actually want to cancel the wedding. I wanted the wedding we planned. I wanted to walk down the aisle without wondering whether my sister had arranged some secret cue for her boyfriend to pull out a ring near the cake. I wanted one day where I wasn't forced to make room for someone else's crisis. He said, "Then we protect that." A couple days later, my parents asked to meet at a coffee shop. Neutral ground, my father said, as if we were negotiating a hostage situation, and not whether my sister could hijack my wedding. I went alone because I didn't want them to say my fiancé was controlling me. My mother hugged me too tightly, which meant she was nervous. My father bought my drink, which meant he wanted credit before the argument started. My mother said they understood I was upset, but maybe there was a compromise. Just a few minutes during the reception. Maybe after dinner, maybe before dancing. Her boyfriend could say something sweet, ask her to marry him. Everyone would clap. Then the attention would go back to me. I stared at her. "Do you hear yourself?" My father sighed. "Avlin, she's very hurt." "So am I." "Yes, but you're getting married." I swear, I felt something in my brain pop like a tiny cheap light bulb. "So because I'm happy, I'm not allowed to be hurt?" My mother looked down at her coffee. My father said I was twisting his words. Parents love saying that when their words arrive, twisted straight from the factory. I told them if the pressure continued, I would reconsider who was invited. Then, because I was tired and angry and not at my most elegant, I added that I would also reconsider the monthly help I sent for their household bills if they kept treating me like a wallet with obedience issues. There. That was the money threat my sister had invented, finally made real by me because I was stupid enough to walk into the script she wrote. I regretted it the second it came out. Not because it wasn't fair to set financial boundaries, but because I had handed them the perfect soundbite. My father's face hardened. So now the truth comes out, I said. The truth came out when you asked me to share my wedding like a family coupon. My mother started crying softly. I hated that too. Not because I thought she was faking, but because her tears always made me feel like the villain even when I was bleeding right there in front of her. I left before I said something worse. In the car, I cried so hard I had to lower the seat back and breathe through my mouth. I felt childish. I felt mean. I felt like maybe everyone was right and I had become cold from years of being the dependable one. Then I got home and saw another text from my sister calling me a financial bully, and the guilt evaporated so fast it could have powered the whole neighborhood. My fiancé found me pacing in the kitchen. I told him about the coffee shop, including the money comment, because I wasn't going to pretend I had handled everything perfectly. He listened, then said, "You were pushed. That doesn't make every word perfect, but it also doesn't make them innocent." I wanted to believe that. Some of me did. Some of me still heard my grandmother saying my sister should have had her turn first. That was the phrase everyone kept circling back to, how this looked. And I was learning that how this looks usually meant the lie reached me first. Then my mother came over one evening with a casserole, which was alarming because she only cooked for conflict, funerals, or church events. She stood in my living room and said she wanted to understand why I was so upset about the money part. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because my mother had somehow walked past the wedding hijacking and gone straight to the accounting department. I pulled out my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I used to track bills. Rent assistance during my father's reduced hours. Utility payments. Dental work my mother had postponed until I paid the office directly. Grocery deliveries during the winter when their car needed repairs. I had never made a big speech about any of it. I had never asked for a thank you parade. I did it because they were my parents and I could help. My sister, meanwhile, lived in their house, worked part-time when she felt like it, and contributed when she could, which seemed to mean when guilt, weather, and her mood aligned under a full moon. I turned the laptop toward my mother and said, "Explain to me how I'm controlling the family with money when I'm paying bills quietly and she's paying almost nothing while telling everyone I'm the problem." My mother stared at the screen. She looked tired suddenly, not angry, just tired in a way I hadn't expected. She said, you bring it up all the time. I never brought it up until Dad made me the villain for saying no." My mother didn't answer. That silence said more than any apology she had ever avoided. She knew. Maybe not everything, maybe not the full shape of it, but she knew my sister had been stretching the truth until it fit around her like a costume. I wanted my mother to say, "You're right." I wanted her to stand up, call my sister, call my grandmother, call the whole family group chat, and correct it publicly. Instead, she rubbed her forehead and said, "I don't know how to fix this without hurting her." And there it was again, without hurting her, not without hurting me. Me being hurt was apparently the default setting, like background noise. I said, quieter than I meant to, "You don't have to fix her feelings. You just have to stop asking me to pay for them." My mother cried then, but differently. Less like a weapon, more like a person realizing the floor under her had been rotten for a while. She left without making promises. 2 days later, my sister's boyfriend called me. I almost didn't answer because I didn't have his number saved, and random calls are either scams or consequences. But something made me pick up. He sounded nervous. He said he was sorry to bother me, but someone in the family had made a comment about me being furious over the reception plan. And that was when he realized my sister's version did not make sense. According to her, I had approved the plan. According to everyone else, I was apparently the villain of the month. I sat down right there on the edge of the bed. "What exactly did she tell you?" He took a breath. "She said you thought it would be sweet if I proposed during the reception. She said you were helping with the timing and that your fiancé thought it would make the night special." My whole body went cold. Not angry yet. Cold first. Like my brain needed to freeze the moment so I could examine it without screaming. I said, "No, I never approved that. My fiancé never approved that." I said no the first time I heard it. He was quiet. I said, "Did she tell you we fought about it?" She said you got emotional but came around. Came around. I had become a furniture delivery. I told him everything. Not in a cruel way. I didn't call her names. I didn't even tell him to run, though my soul was standing behind me with a little flag that said run. I just told him the truth. She had asked through my parents. I refused. She spread a different version. My family was pressuring me. I had proof if he needed it. He said, "I feel like an idiot." I said, "You're not the one who lied." He laughed once, but it sounded awful. I bought the ring. She made it sound like this was already part of the plan. That hit me harder than I expected, because he wasn't some villain trying to steal my spotlight. He was a regular guy who loved my sister enough to buy a ring and believe her when she said my wedding was available for rent. He asked if I hated him. I said no. I meant it. After we hung up, he texted me, probably because he wanted it in writing. "Just to be clear, you never approved this, right?" I replied, "No, I never approved it." I told my fiancé and he got very quiet. His quiet scared me more than anger. He said, "We need to tell the venue not to accept changes from anyone but us." So we did. We emailed the coordinator that night. We gave a password for any timeline changes, because apparently my wedding now needed security like a discount bank account. We told the photographer the same thing. The florist, too. The DJ. Every vendor got a polite message that sounded calm only because my fiancé edited out the parts where I typed in all caps. The next morning, my sister sent me a voice message. I didn't listen right away. I made coffee first. I ate toast I couldn't taste. Then I pressed play. She was crying. Real crying this time, I think. She said her boyfriend was acting weird and asking questions. She said I had no right to interfere in her relationship. She said I had always been jealous that people cared about her. Then she said, "You already get the wedding. Why couldn't I have the one thing people would actually remember?" That afternoon, her boyfriend ended the relationship. I know because my sister appeared at my apartment before dinner, pounding on the door like the building owed her money. I opened it against my better judgment, because my neighbor was already peeking out, and I didn't want this turning into hallway theater. My sister looked destroyed. Mascara under her eyes, hair half falling out of a clip, sweatshirt inside out. For 1 second, I saw the kid she used to be, the one who cried when our parents fought and crawled into my bed even though she was older. For 1 second, I almost softened. Then she screamed, "Are you happy now?" And there went the softness right out the window. I said, "Don't do this in the hallway." She pushed past me into the apartment, which should tell you everything about boundaries in my family. My fiancé stood up from the couch, but I shook my head because I wanted to handle it. Did I handle it well? No, but I handled it. She accused me of ruining her life. She said her boyfriend called her manipulative. She said he wouldn't even let her explain. I said, "What part did he misunderstand?" She looked at me like I had slapped her. "You told him everything." He asked me if I had approved it. I told him the truth. "You could have covered for me." I actually stepped back. "Covered for you stealing my wedding?" It wasn't stealing, it was sharing. No, sharing is when both people agree. What you wanted was taking with nicer lighting. She started crying harder. She said she was tired of being the older sister with nothing to show for it. She said I got the stable job, the good fiancé, the pretty wedding, the responsible label. She said everyone looked at me like I had my life together, and they looked at her like she was a problem to be managed. For the first time, she said something true. And because it was true, it hurt. I did have things she wanted. I did get praised for being functional. But I had also become functional because no one gave me another option. I wanted to tell her that, but I was too angry. I said, "Your pain doesn't give you permission to humiliate me." She screamed that I was cold. I screamed back that she was exhausting. My fiancé stepped between us then, not touching anyone, just putting his body in the airspace before we both said things that would live forever. I called a rideshare and told her it was coming. She called me a bitch. I said, "Probably. Still not your venue." Not my finest line. I admit that. It did, however, feel amazing for about 4 seconds. After she left, I fell apart. I locked myself in the bedroom and cried into a pillow while my fiancé sat outside the door like a patient saint I definitely did not deserve in that moment. I wasn't crying because I thought I was wrong. I was crying because being right did not feel clean. It felt sticky and heavy and mean. It felt like dragging a family curse through wet cement. My parents called the next day. They had heard about the breakup from my sister, obviously, in a version where I had poisoned her boyfriend. But this time, my mother sounded less sure. My father asked if I really had proof she told him I approved the proposal. I sent the screenshots of his messages asking me about it. Then I sent my original messages to my sister saying no. Then I sent the vendor email where we had restricted changes. My father didn't reply for a long time. When he finally called, his voice sounded rough. He said, "She told us you were exaggerating." I said, "You believed her because it was easier." He didn't deny it. That weekend, my parents sat my sister down and told her she needed to start contributing fairly if she was going to keep living with them. Not because of me, they said, because the whole situation had made them realize how much they had been enabling her. My mother told me this later, and even then she said it carefully, like the sentence might explode if she held it wrong. My sister did not take it well. Shocking, I know. She cried. She accused them of choosing me. She said I had bought them with bill money. She packed 3 bags and moved into my grandmother's house before dinner. For about a week, things went strangely quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet. There's a difference. Peace has softness. This was more like when the power goes out and you're waiting for the refrigerator to start making noise again. One night, my grandmother called me directly. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I was in a reckless mood. That's the thing about being pressured too much. Eventually, you stop avoiding the fire and start walking toward it with your sleeves rolled up. She didn't start with hello. She said, "Your sister is devastated." I said, "Hello to you too." She should have had this first. I stood in my kitchen with a dish towel in my hand and felt the room narrow. Had what first? Marriage, a proposal, a home. Those things matter when you're the older daughter. There it was. Not hidden, not implied, not wrapped in concern. Just the ugly little belief sitting on the table at last. I said, "So this was never about sharing my reception. You think I jumped the line?" She huffed. "Don't make it sound foolish. In families, there's an order." I laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "What am I, a deli ticket?" She said I was being disrespectful. I said she had spent my whole life teaching me that my sister's feelings were a family emergency, and mine were a scheduling issue. She told me I was dramatic. I told her she had used that word on me so often it had lost its teeth. Then she said, "Your sister needed that moment more than you." I went very still. Because that sentence summed up my childhood so perfectly, I almost admired the efficiency. I thought of my birthdays, my graduations, the job I got where my sister cried because she was falling behind, the apartment I moved into where my grandmother asked why I needed to show off. Every little moment I had tried to claim had been measured against my sister's sadness and found excessive. I said, "She may need a lot of things. My wedding isn't one of them." My grandmother said I would regret shutting family out. I said, "Maybe, but I already regret letting family in too far." She went quiet. Not because she understood, because she was offended. Those are very different silences. A week before the wedding, I got an email from the venue coordinator with the subject line, "Timeline confirmation question." I opened it while sitting at my desk at the clinic, surrounded by patient charts and that faint minty smell every dental office has no matter how much you clean. The coordinator wrote that she wanted to confirm we did not want to include the surprise proposal moment that had been requested earlier by a family member. She said it had been placed as pending before our vendor password email, because nothing was approved without direct confirmation from the couple. For a second, I just stared. Then my ears started ringing. Earlier, weeks earlier, my sister had contacted the venue while still pretending this was a family discussion. She had tried to put the proposal into the reception timeline behind my back before her boyfriend even knew the truth. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't one emotional outburst. It was a plan with administrative follow-through. I forwarded the email to my fiancé, then called him even though he was working. He answered, and I said, "She contacted the venue." He said one word I will not repeat because I'm trying to keep this classy, which is hilarious considering everything else. Then I called my parents. I didn't ease into it. I didn't ask how they were. I said, "Check your email." I sent them the venue message and waited on the line while they read it. My mother whispered, "Oh my God." My father said nothing. I said, "This is what you defended." My father said, very quietly, "I know. I expected excuses. I was ready for them. I had a whole courtroom speech prepared in my head, complete with exhibits and emotional damages. But my father sounded broken in a way I hadn't heard before. He said he was sorry. Not the usual sorry you feel that way. Not sorry this got complicated. Just sorry. Then he said, "We made you the steady one because it was convenient." My father continued. He said they had always assumed I could handle more. More patience, more responsibility, more disappointment. More of my sister's mess. He said they told themselves it was because I was stronger, but maybe they had just stopped asking what it cost me. I wanted to forgive him right there. I also wanted to scream at him for taking almost 3 decades to notice. Both feelings existed at the same time because healing is rude like that. I said, at the wedding, no messages from her. No messages from Grandma. No passing along tears, emergencies, guilt, anything. If they show up, the staff handles it. If they call, you don't bring it to me. My mother said, what if your grandmother is really upset? My father said before I could answer, then she can be upset somewhere else. I don't think I had ever loved him more than in that tiny, brutal moment. On the night before the wedding, my sister texted me. I saw the preview only. I hope you enjoy your perfect little day knowing what you did to me. My fiancé took one look at my face, gently took the phone from my hand and put it in a drawer. The wedding morning arrived with sunshine, which felt suspicious. I had expected thunder, locusts, maybe a sinkhole shaped like my grandmother, but the sky was clear. The outdoor ceremony space looked exactly how we had imagined it, and for a few hours I let myself be happy without waiting for punishment. I remember standing in the small getting ready room, holding a paper cup of water because my hands were too shaky for anything breakable. My mother was fixing one tiny piece of my hair and crying silently. I said, please don't cry on me unless it's supportive crying. She laughed through it and said, it is. Before walking down the aisle, my father came in. He looked at me in my dress and swallowed hard. He said, you deserve today. Just that. Not a speech, not a dramatic apology. Just a sentence he should have said years earlier and finally did. I nodded because if I talked, I was going to ruin my makeup. And that makeup had cost enough to deserve respect. The ceremony was beautiful. Not perfect. The microphone crackled once. A small bug landed on my bouquet. My fiancé's voice shook when he said his vows, and mine cracked on a word I had practiced in the mirror like a lunatic. But it was ours. No one interrupted. No one stood up with a ring that wasn't meant for me. For the first time in months, my body believed I was safe. Then the reception started. We made it through dinner. We made it through toasts. We made it through the first dance. I was starting to think maybe the day would stay mine. Dangerous thought. Never trust calm around people who enjoy emotional arson. A cousin approached me near the dessert table with a face like she had just seen a raccoon driving. She whispered, your sister and Grandma are outside. My stomach dropped so hard I felt it in my knees. Outside where? Near the entrance. They're talking to people as they come in from the patio. Your sister is crying. Grandma is telling people she wasn't allowed to see you. Of course she was. My grandmother could turn a doorway into a courtroom. My phone buzzed in my clutch. The preview showed a message from my sister. Everyone will know who you really are when they see Grandma crying outside and you hiding in here. I didn't open it. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. My thumb hovered over the screen like the dumbest little moth. Then my fiancé appeared beside me and gently took my hand. Look at me, he said. I looked at him. He said, this is ours. My mother was across the room, already looking toward the entrance like instinct had grabbed her by the throat. I saw the old version of her almost move. The mother who would run to manage my grandmother's feelings. The mother who would whisper, just speak to her for 1 minute. The mother who would ask me to be reasonable because I was easier to reason with. My father stepped in front of her. He said something I couldn't hear. She froze. Then she looked at me, looked back at the entrance, and stayed where she was. That tiny non-movement changed something in me. I can't explain it without sounding dramatic, but honestly, it felt huge. My mother did not fix the scene. My father did not hand me the guilt. The staff handled it quietly. A coordinator and someone from security spoke with my sister and grandmother. They were not allowed in. No police, no screaming in the ballroom, no cinematic disaster. Just 2 women being told, politely and firmly, that they could not enter a private event. My sister apparently told a few relatives that I had banned family. My grandmother said she felt faint. Someone brought her water. Then they left. The world did not end. The cake did not collapse. My marriage did not dissolve because my grandmother had feelings in a parking lot. I went back to the dance floor. I wish I could say I fully relaxed. I didn't. I checked faces. I watched doors. I flinched every time someone came up too fast. But I also danced. I kissed my husband. Husband. Weird word at first. Good weird. I laughed when my father tried to dance and looked like he was fighting invisible bees. I watched my mother talk to guests instead of chasing my grandmother, and I felt something loosen inside me. Not all the way, but enough to breathe. When we got back to our apartment the next day, there was a letter from my sister in our mailbox. Actual paper. Very dramatic. Very her. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at it for a while before opening it with a butter knife because apparently I needed ceremony for my emotional injury. The letter started with, I know I exaggerated, which was already a warning sign. Nobody who begins an apology with that much elbow room is coming in clean. She wrote that she had been hurt, that she felt forgotten, that she panicked when she saw me moving ahead while she was stuck. Some of it was honest. I could feel that. Then came the turn. She wrote, but you didn't have to turn everyone against me. You didn't have to make me lose my relationship. You didn't have to embarrass Grandma. I put the letter down and laughed, not because it was funny, because if I didn't laugh, I was going to start chewing the table. My husband read it after me. He said, that is a refund request disguised as an apology. My parents came over that weekend. I was nervous in a way that annoyed me. I had just gotten married, held firm at my own reception, survived the parking lot guilt parade, and still my parents sitting on my couch made me feel like a kid waiting to be told I had been selfish with my toys. My mother brought flowers. My father brought a toolbox because one cabinet door in our kitchen was loose and he communicates love through hardware. They sat down, and for once no one started by defending my sister. My mother said, we owe you an apology. I waited. I didn't rescue her from the discomfort. Old me would have. Old me would have said, it's okay, before she even explained, just to make the room less painful. New me sat there with my hands wrapped around a mug and let the silence do its job. She said they had let my sister's feelings become the center of the family for too long. My father said they confused my independence with not needing support. My mother cried, but she didn't ask me to comfort her. That mattered. I told them I loved them. I also told them I was not going back to how things were. I would help with specific bills if I chose to, paid directly, with clear limits. I would not be the emergency fund for everyone's bad decisions. I would not attend gatherings where my sister or grandmother were allowed to ambush me with guilt. I would not discuss my marriage as a family resource. My father nodded. My mother looked scared, but nodded too. Then came the sister part. They asked what kind of contact I was willing to have. I said I wasn't ready for a relationship with her beyond basic family updates through them. No private calls, no surprise visits, no messages forwarded. If she wanted to apologize someday, she could do it without blaming me in the same breath. My mother said, she's still hurting. I said, so am I. This time, nobody argued. My parents, meanwhile, started experiencing the consequences of not having my sister in the house and also not having me emotionally available for every crisis. They had to deal with their own guilt. They had to say no without using me as the reason. They had to learn that, we can't help you that way, is a complete sentence even when the other person cries. A few months after the wedding, my sister tried to move back in with them. My mother told me about it before I heard it from someone else, which I appreciated. My sister had called saying my grandmother was too negative, which was rich. She wanted to come home, reset everything, and get back to normal. Normal in her mind meant no rent, no chores beyond vibes, and everyone pretending the wedding disaster was a misunderstanding caused by stress. My parents said she could come back only if she paid a fair monthly amount, followed house rules, worked steady hours, and went to counseling. My mother said counseling like she expected the word to burst into flames. My sister lost it. She said they were treating her like a tenant. My father said, then act like an adult daughter who lives here, not a guest we're afraid of. I wish I had been there to see that. I would have brought popcorn. Quiet popcorn. Respectful popcorn. She refused at first. Then she realized my grandmother's house was not the supportive spa she had imagined. My grandmother's love came with commentary. Too much commentary. Why wasn't my sister married? Why had she let her boyfriend leave? Why couldn't she be more careful? Why did she not dress better? Why did she sleep late? My grandmother could smother you and judge your breathing pattern at the same time, so my sister moved back under the conditions. She was angry. She was embarrassed. She did not become a glowing self-improvement poster. She complained. She slammed cabinets. She paid late the first month, and my father made her pay the late amount anyway. My mother almost caved, then didn't. I heard that part and had to sit down, because my mother not caving was still a rare weather event. Slowly, things shifted. Not in a neat montage, more like a squeaky door opening an inch at a time. My sister picked up more hours at work. She started buying her own groceries. She went to a counseling appointment, then another, though she announced both like she deserved a parade. She stopped posting vague attacks online after my mother told her she would not be invited to family dinners if she kept using them as content. My grandmother did not adjust well. She called my mother often, complaining that the family had been split by my wedding. My mother still struggled. I could hear it in her voice sometimes, that old guilt trying to climb back into the driver's seat. But she started catching herself. That was new. She would begin with, maybe your grandmother just, then stop and say, no, I'm doing it again. Then I got pregnant. I found out on a morning when I was running late for work and had only taken the test because my body was acting suspicious. I left it on the bathroom counter, brushed my teeth, looked down, and froze. Positive. I called my husband from the bathroom even though he was in the kitchen. He thought I had found a spider. I opened the door holding the test, and he just stared at it, then at me, then back at it. He said, "Is that?" I said, "Either that or the stick is being very dramatic." He laughed and cried at the same time. I cried too, then immediately panicked because apparently joy and fear are roommates. We were happy, terrified, but happy. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and thought very suddenly of my grandmother. Not because I wanted to call her, because I knew I didn't. That realization felt harsh even to me. A baby makes people weird. Families start talking about fresh starts, new chapters, everyone coming together. Babies are like emotional amnesty for people who don't want to do the actual work. I knew my grandmother would expect access. She would expect to be told. She would expect pictures, visits, opinions. Maybe a special title she could weaponize later. The old family rule would say she had a right. I didn't believe that anymore. My husband and I decided to tell my parents after the first appointment. We told them at our apartment over dinner. My mother cried into a napkin. My father hugged me so carefully, you would think I was already made of glass. They were happy in this nervous, tender way that made me emotional despite myself. Then my mother asked softly, "Are you telling your grandmother?" I said, "Not right now." She nodded immediately. Too immediately. Like she was proving she could. My father squeezed her hand. I appreciated it, but I also knew the real test would come later when my grandmother found out from someone else and started dialing. My sister found out through my parents after I gave permission. She sent a short text. "Congratulations. I hope you're feeling okay." That was it. No accusation, no speech, no demand. I stared at it for a while, suspicious as a cat near a cucumber. Then I wrote, "Thank you. I am." My grandmother found out eventually because families leak information like cheap plumbing. She called my mother first. I was not there, but my mother told me about it later, and I could practically hear the conversation through her exhausted face. My grandmother said she couldn't believe she had been excluded from such important news. She said she was still family. She said she had a right to know about her great-grandchild. She cried. She said I was punishing her for one disagreement at a wedding, which was such a tiny description for months of manipulation that I almost respected the audacity. My mother at first started to explain. She said, "Mom, she's just been under a lot of stress, and maybe if you—" Then she stopped. I love that she told me that part, because it was honest. She almost fell into the old habit. Then she caught herself. She told my grandmother, "No, this is Evelyn's child. Access is not automatic. If you want any place in her life, you'll have to respect her boundaries." My grandmother apparently went silent, which must have been a medical miracle. Then she said, "So you're letting your daughter separate this family?" My mother said, "I'm letting my daughter protect her family." When my mother told me that, I cried. Not cute crying, pregnant crying, which is basically a weather emergency. I cried because for once I had not been in the room fighting for myself. For once, someone else had held the line when I wasn't there to supervise it like an exhausted security guard. My pregnancy changed things in strange ways. I became less willing to entertain nonsense, partly because I was tired and nauseous, and partly because the baby made the future feel less theoretical. It wasn't just about whether I could survive family chaos anymore. I had survived plenty. Gold star for me, I guess. It was about whether I wanted my child growing up watching me shrink on command. I didn't. My sister kept making small progress. Again, not movie progress. She did not show up with a handwritten apology, a stable career, and a new personality. She still got defensive. She still made things about herself sometimes. But she also started saying things like, "I handled that badly," which from her was basically a moon landing. She asked my mother not to invite her to anything where I would feel ambushed. She paid her share more consistently. She stopped using my parents as emotional messengers. One afternoon, she sent me a message that said, "I know I haven't really apologized. I'm not ready to do it right without making excuses. But I know that's on me." I read it 3 times. It was the closest thing to accountability she had ever sent. And somehow the fact that it wasn't polished made it feel more real. I didn't rush to forgive her. I wrote back, "I appreciate you saying that. That's all I can say right now." She replied, Fair. Fair. From my sister. I nearly checked the sky for falling objects. My son was born on a rainy morning after a long labor that I will not describe in detail because some things are between me, my medical team, and the ceiling tile I threatened during contractions. My husband cried when he heard the first little sound. I was too exhausted to cry right away. I just looked at this tiny red-faced person on my chest and thought, oh, there you are. Motherhood did not make me instantly wise. Please. I was swollen, leaking, sleep-deprived, and panic-searching nothing because I had banned myself from panic searches after midnight. But it did make certain things brutally clear. My son was not a bridge. He was not a reward. He was not a peace offering I owed to anyone. He was a person, and my job was to protect the space around him until he was old enough to have his own voice. My parents visited at the hospital and followed every rule without complaint. My mother washed her hands like she was preparing for surgery. My father held the baby and looked terrified in the sweetest way. He whispered, "Hi, buddy." And I saw the man who had failed me in some ways and was trying, genuinely trying, not to fail the next generation the same way. My sister did not come to the hospital. She sent food to our apartment for when we got home, arranged through my mother, with a note that said, "No need to respond. Just thought you'd be hungry." I cried over that too because postpartum hormones are a scam, and also because it was thoughtful without demanding anything. That was new. A few weeks later, my sister asked if she could meet the baby at my parents' house while my husband was there, and only if I was comfortable. Look at that sentence. Boundaries, conditions, respect. I almost didn't recognize her writing. We agreed to a short visit. I was nervous the whole drive. My husband kept one hand on the wheel and one hand near mine, like he could physically anchor me. My sister was already there when we arrived. She looked nervous too. She did not rush me. She did not reach for the baby. She said, "He's beautiful." And then she looked at me and said, "You don't have to let me hold him if you're not ready." I was not ready. So I said, "Not today." For 1 second, I saw hurt flash across her face. Old her would have made that hurt my problem. Newer her swallowed it and nodded. Okay. That moment did more for me than any dramatic apology could have. Because respect is not what people say when they get what they want. Respect is what they do when they don't. My grandmother did not meet him. Not then. Maybe not ever. I don't say that with triumph. I know people online like clean villain endings where the bad person is banished and everyone claps. Real life is heavier. My grandmother is still my grandmother. She made cookies with me when I was little. She also taught me my happiness was negotiable if my sister was sad enough. Both things are true. I can hold both and still keep my door locked. The year after the wedding was not the beginning I imagined when I first got engaged. I thought marriage would begin with flowers, photos, thank you cards, and maybe mild arguments about furniture. Instead, it began with family fallout, blocked messages, awkward apologies, and me learning that boundaries feel less like empowerment at first, and more like withdrawal from a drug you didn't know you were taking. But my life got quieter. Not perfect. Quieter. My parents and I built a relationship with more honesty and fewer assumptions. They still messed up sometimes. My mother still occasionally tried to soften someone else's behavior before catching herself. My father still went silent when emotions got too big. But they were trying in visible ways. Not just saying they meant well and expecting me to applaud. My sister and I stayed distant, but not hostile. There were small updates. A photo of the baby's foot sent after she asked if it was okay. A polite birthday message. A conversation at a family lunch where she told a story about work and did not turn it into a competition. Tiny things. Boring things. The kind of things healthy people probably don't even notice because they didn't spend years treating calm like a rare animal. The strangest part is that refusing the proposal at my wedding did not just protect one day. I thought that was what I was fighting for at first. A reception. A first dance. A cake that didn't come with someone else's engagement speech. But it turned out I was fighting for the right to stop being the family shock absorber. The daughter who paid quietly, adjusted quickly, forgave early, and made room until there was barely a corner left for herself. I didn't fix my family. I don't think one person can fix a whole family, especially when half of them are convinced the problem is your tone. I didn't turn my sister into a saint. I didn't make my grandmother understand. I didn't erase the years where my parents leaned on me too hard and called it trust. What I did was stop handing over the parts of my life that mattered just because someone else arrived with tears and a better story. I was steady. I am steady. But I am not furniture. My wedding day was not ruined. That still makes my sister angry, I think. Maybe my grandmother too. They stood outside trying to turn my boundary into a spectacle. And inside, I kept dancing. Not perfectly, not without fear, but I danced. And honestly, after everything, that is the part I remember most.